Chevalier, les bienvenus, herzliche willkommen. Is there also Bartalo? We can use more languages. Okay. So this panel will be about multilingualism and democracy. And we have three very special guests. You have their short CVs on the site of European Lab. So I won't mention all the details, but really I think they are very special, like Mr. Robert Schwarz, who is the president of the Jewish community of Cluj. He, as a civil person, is a researcher. He's a doctor in chemistry. And you have to know that in the 80s, he was kind of a member of an informal opposition, as he participated in the editing and publishing of a samizdat journal. Okay, that's true. Yes. Then, after the turn of after the revolution, after '89. He entered also in more in the public life, and he was a member of the Democratic Union of the Hungarians from Romania. And then since 2010, he is the president of the local Jewish community. And I have to say that during his presidency, a lot of things were done, like also symbolic things, but also practical things. Like a couple of years ago, he and the community, and with allies, of course, they succeeded to raise a monument for the Holocaust. Yes, it's in the park over the street. You can look at it, and there is a very vivid communal and conference and so on, so life in the midst of the community. Then Ingo Tegger is the president, the director of the German Cultural Center. And he's also a specialist in economics or business, but for us it's more important that he's a cultural manager. And I find very interesting that he spent a lot of time in Africa, and a bit, okay, and I'm pretty sure that you had a lot of experiences linked to multilingualism there. And Laszlo Fosto, he's an anthropologist and ethnographer, and he also works as a researcher. One of his main issues is the Roma communities, but he deals also with economical anthropology and other stuff. And you have to know that he is also an activist in a certain way, as he is a volunteer in managing the networking list of Roma research. Okay, so first I would like to ask our guests to speak a little bit about their organizations, institutions, briefly what they think is more important or interesting. And I would like to start with Robert Schwarz, but let me signal that all of us, we are good friends, and we know each other for a long time, and so you shouldn't expect that this will be a very formal discussion, okay? Robert, Robi, megkérlek szépen, hogy beszélj egy kicsit akkor a hitközségről.
Köszönöm szépen. A kolozsvári zsidó hitközségnek jelen pillanatban 420-nál valamivel több tagja van. Ezen kívül 15-20 szimpatizáns is. A tagság és a szimpatizások azt jelentik, hogy be vannak iratkozva a hitközségbe, fizetik a tagdíjat, részt vesznek valamelyesen a tevékenységeinknek, és elfogadják a statutumunkat. Ez a 420 tag, ez nem azt jelenti, hogy ennyi zsidó él Kolozsváron. Ez sokkal nehezebb megszámolni, meghatározni. Tudniillik, a családtagjai is, akik esetleg nem zsidók, keresztények vagy ateisták, nem istenhívők. Ha alaposan végignézzük, akkor körülbelül mondhatnám, hogy körülbelül 180-200 zsidó vagy zsidó származású tagja van a hitközségnek. Valószínű, hogy tudják vagy ismerik ezt a fogalmat. A zsidók akkor számítanak valóban zsidónak, ha édesanyjuk részéről zsidók. Apa, nagyapa, nagyanyai ágról pedig zsidó származások. Ez természetesen ilyen formai megkülönböztetés, amit mi azért nem támogatunk kimondottan. Mindenki zsidó, aki zsidónak vallja magát és elfogadja a zsidóságnak a hagyományait. Itt megint kitérhetnék arra, hogy a zsidóság az nem kimondottan vallást jelent ma már, legalábbis szerintünk, amiért lehet, hogy sokan megköveznének, de mi zsidóknak tartjuk akkor is, hogyha nemzetileg zsidónak vallják magukat. És a vallással a nem istenhívő zsidóknak annyi kapcsolatuk van, hogy tartják a Tórának a szabályzatait, amennyire lehet, hagyományápolás szintjén. Tehát eljárnak még istentiszteletekre is, amennyire lehet, dacára, hogy nagyon kevesen ismerik magát a héber nyelvet, de úgy tartjuk, hogy a hagyomány ápolása tartja meg a zsidóságot anyanyelvtől függetlenül.
Én gondolom, Róbi, hogy a nyelvhasználatról még beszélünk egy kicsit későbben. Azt szeretném itt jelezni, hogy milyen drámai ez a helyzet, hogy csak néhány száz zsidó lakosa van most Kolozsvárnak, mert hogy a holokauszt előtt Kolozsváron több mint 16 000 zsidó lakos élt. So I would like to signal how dramatic and tragic is that in the present there are only a couple of hundreds of Jewish inhabitants in the city, because you have to know that before the Holocaust there were more than 16,000 inhabitants, Jewish inhabitants, which was, I think, 20% of the total inhabitants of the city. So you can just think about it. Okay, we come back later to Robert Schwarz. Could you tell us, please, a couple of words about how you guys work in the culture center and what's your, I don't know, usual job is?
Yes, of course, with pleasure. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me. And yes, we at the German Cultural Center work first and foremost to strengthen the cultural dialogue between Cluj and Germany. And we do that as a part of German foreign cultural policy, which has the idea of creating a dialogue with all nations in the European Union and in the world, because what we believe is that culture creates understanding of another, of the other also, understanding of the other's values, intentions, and most of all also mentality, which is something I think we can come back to later with a plurilingualism debate as well. And we believe that this mutual understanding is the basis for everything else in terms of diplomacy, in terms of collaboration and working together. We were founded in 1994 here in Cluj-Napoca by members of the Babiš-Bolyai University, by members of the German minority, and also by initiatives from the German diplomatic side. Therefore, we celebrated our 25th anniversary this year. And the way we work is basically a threefold approach. We have three departments. First of all, a language department, so we teach German and also offer exams in the German language. Only German. We also get asked if we have Japanese courses or so. I was kind of hoping that the name German Cultural Center tells what we do, but sometimes we get these questions. So the language. The second department is a library, which we just modernized. And the third department is the cultural department, which might also be the one with which we are most visible in the city, because we also organize events like film series, concerts, festivals, and workshops and so on.
Okay. So, László Fosztó, Laci? Do you have a microphone?
Yes, I got
your
one.
own? Wow.
Yes, there are microphones for everybody.
Okay. Do I know well that there are 17 officially recognized minorities in the country?
There are 17 in the parliament, but altogether there are 20.
Okay.
Because Hungarians are not represented in the same way as the others, because they have own parties. So yes, the Institute for Research on National Minorities just across the river, uphill here. It's a rather new institute. It started in 2007. And I am a researcher working in this institute. We are about 30 people working there, 20 researchers roughly, and 10 administrative personnel. And the disciplines are there: sociologists, ethnographers, anthropologists, juridical experts, and I'm myself an ethnographer, a former student of Chilla, so she's a professor of mine, of course, for long. And I did research on Roma before I joined the institute. I studied actually in Germany for a while and then returned to work in this institute. And the mission of this institute is, according to the law, to deal with, in Romanian, let's say that Institutul pentru Studierea Problemelor Minorităților Naționale. The minorities' problems, actually not the minorities have the problem, but the whole society has a problem if the minorities are in trouble. So we are dealing with all the issues related to ethnic diversity and linguistic diversity. And of course the mission is to maintain the diversity and to maintain the problems in this sense, because if diversity is a problem, then it's our job to to keep it like that. And
if it wouldn't be, then you would remain without a job.
I would go to the institute, actually.
Okay. Okay. I suggest to make a short bypass to make a short parenthesis. And I would like to ask Lotzi, because he's an anthropologist, to tell us a couple of words about how anthropology sees plurilingualism as a phenomenon.
Well, communication...
Don't be too theoretical, but we need some base.
Like all species, humankind is also having a kind of system of communication, and this is the language. But human communication is still particular within the animal realm or animal kingdom, because language is more flexible at one hand. So it is not a fixed system, because, for example, ants can communicate very well. They are very good organizers. The whole system is very smoothly working, but there is no, for example, there is no revolution in the ant society, like in human society.
Like in the Woody Allen's film, there is.
or the bees are communicating well, the dolphins are communicating well. We know little about that, but anthropologists study human societies all over the world. And one statement which is important, I would start with this, that the norm in most societies is plurilingualism. So monolingual societies are very rare in history, because usually they are living mainly on a small island. But in bigger continents or bigger islands, there are always diversity between the languages. And this diversity usually is gradual. So you have dialects next to each other, and there is also, of course, human movement around, and people learn the language of the others. This contact between the languages is usually part of the social life. So there are very rarely in traditional societies you have special institutions for teaching the language. So people learn the language naturally by interaction. And this is still the norm, of course, in each society, because we all learn the language from our parents. There is not a special institution where the kids are put and they learn the language there. But this thing was also part of the anthropological methodology. Then traditionally anthropologists participate in the social life of other groups and learn the language in the way the natives speak. And just one short thing about why we have now societies where the norm is the monolingualism. So there are societies which developed, and mainly due to technological advancement and political development, like the nation state is the most salient tool which creates monolingualism and linguistic exclusivity, and where the polity, the society, and the language and the culture should all overlap. This is the national idea. Of course, it's never achieved, but luckily there is also institutions which are developed in order to protect the diversity of the existing diversity of societies. And of course, maybe later we can speak about this. And the other aspect is the technology, which is very important in the development of linguistic exclusivity or monolingualism, because when you are part of a small group, your power to spread your own language or your version of the worldview is limited. But when you have a very powerful institution at your hand, and when you have mass media or social media, then it's a totally different situation, which probably we don't yet understand fully what is the consequence of this.
Okay, thank you. We will come back to this issue. I would like to try to, I don't know, mention a few examples of local traditions or regional traditions of plurilingualism, because as Lottie said, also in this region, plurilingualism was the norm, and there are still a lot of people who live in ethnically and linguistically mixed communities, and they speak fluently each other's languages. Like I would like maybe to mention about Ilonka Néni Lakatusiljana, who is a good friend of us. She is an old Roma lady who worked all her life as a street sweeper. And we met each other in the 90s, then we became good friends. She was our Romani teacher, mine and Lottie's and other colleagues, and we had just to introduce a little bit also Transit House in this discussion. We had a couple of very beautiful experimental art projects where she was involved. So she played in theater plays and movies and so on. And she is a fluent speaker in Romani, Romanian and Hungarian. We also published together a book about her life story. So I would like to ask first Robbie to share with us some of his personal experiences of this plurilingual social context. And well, I will dare to ask him to be personal, as I know very well that his life started in a very, very particular way, in a very dramatic situation. Megkérhetlek, hogy mondd el ezt a személyes történetedet, hogy is jöttél te a világra, és esetleg a gyerekkori emlékeidről néhány szót megosztanál velünk.
Tehát az én gyerekkori emlékeim, és hogy jöttem a világra, ez a többnyelvűséggel nincs szerintem közös kapcsolatban. Szüleim váradi származásúak voltak, 38-ban kerültek Kolozsvárra, édesapám orvos volt Váradon, nem talált az akkori törvényekből kifolyólag állást, és gondolta, hogy Kolozsváron könnyebb lesz. Hát tévedett, de már itt ragadt. 42-ben munkaszolgálatos lett, és 44-ben március-áprilistól kezdődött a gettóba gyűjtése a kolozsvári zsidóknak, amely rövid, azt talán egy pár hét alatt megtörtént. Nagyon ügyesen és nagyon szervezetten sikerült megvalósítani. Tudniillik, olyan alapon ment, hogy a zsidók jelentkezzenek, mert élelmiszerjegyeket kapnak, persze ez még a gettósítás előtt volt. Nyilván, hogy minden zsidó elment, hogy élelmiszerjegyet kapjon, mert abban a periódusban probléma volt a közellátás, és így egy nagyszerű listát lehetett címmel, lakással, házszámmal összeállítani. Tehát volt egy dokumentum, ami alapján röpke egy hónap alatt a kolozsvári gettót fel lehetett állítani a régi téglagyár helyén, ami nagy fájdalmamra az idén teljesen eltűnt Kolozsvár térképéről. Tavalyig még valami nyomok voltak, de az idénre teljesen elbuldozerezték az egészet.
Il y a même des statistiques, des documents qui attestent le nombre et les histoires des Juifs rassemblés dans les ghettos. Et c'est ce qui nous permet d'avoir une vue d'ensemble sur tous les Juifs qui sont passés par là. Le ghetto a été démoli.
1947-ben emelt emlékmű.
Ici à Cluj, il y a deux monuments, un cimetière et un autre monument dans le parc à côté. Si je reviens à l'histoire de mes parents, mon père a été emprisonné dans un camp de travaux forcés, ma mère a été emprisonnée dans le ghetto. Et elle a eu de la chance parce que la maison dans laquelle on habitait appartenait
és a gettózás után, mikor kezdett világossá válni, hogy miről van szó,
finalement a appartenu à deux officiers hongrois. Et ces officiers ont aidé ma mère à se cacher. Ils l'ont également aidé à s'enfuir de la ville. Elle s'est cachée dans le département de Salaj. À ce moment-là, elle était enceinte. J'étais dans son ventre.
Sok véletlen folytán valahogy az egérlyukakon keresztül sikerült megúszza édesanyám is, és én is. Apám pedig a lágerből egyszer haza lett
Et j'ai eu de la chance parce que finalement ma mère est arrivée à l'hôpital et elle m'a donné naissance à l'hôpital. À un certain moment, mon père a été libéré et envoyé chez soi. Je pense qu'il a eu également de la chance parce qu'il était médecin et il a pu travailler en tant que médecin. Il a réussi à rentrer chez soi en 1945 et il a voyagé pour y arriver pendant quelques mois. Comme je disais, mes parents étaient d'origine de la ville d'Oradea. Et j'ai même dressé un arbre généalogique. J'ai remarqué que ma famille avait également des membres hongrois et j'ai étudié même l'hongrois. Je suis le mouton noir dans le cadre de cette conférence à cause des langues que je maîtrise, parmi lesquelles le français, le russe et le latin.
És erre rátevődött az a többi kollégáim egy részével szemben, hogy egy borzasztó...
J'ai été éduquée à l'allemande et j'ai réussi grâce à cela de passer tous mes examens. Mais je n'ai jamais été capable de parler toutes ces langues. Et je suis un peu arriérée quand il s'agit de la pratique des langues, de ces langues-là. C'est pour ça que je dis que je suis le mouton noir en cette conférence. En 1950 et jusqu'en 1960, mes parents ont souhaité que j'apprends les matières des sciences réelles. Mais malheureusement, les langues étrangères n'ont jamais été une priorité pour moi et mes études. J'aurais dû protester plus, mais finalement je me suis rendu compte que je n'ai pas beaucoup de talent en ce qui concerne les langues étrangères.
So my question was about the usage of Yiddish and Hebrew besides of Hungarian and Romanian in Transylvania.
À côté de l'allemand et l'hongrois en Transylvanie. Les Juifs plus âgés qui ont vécu avant 1944 parlaient yiddish, mais c'était peu nombreux. Ils étaient surtout situés à Maramures, dans le nord de la Roumanie.
És egy olyan érzésem van, hogy ugyanúgy, mint a német meg a lengyel zsidóság, így az
Ces juifs ont parlé hongrois pendant l'Empire autriche-hongrois.
Tehát a kultúrájuk az magyar kultúra volt.
Tout comme les communautés juives de Pologne ou d'Allemagne, qui parlaient également le polonais et l'allemand. Dans les années 30, des problèmes sont apparus, des problèmes liés aux écoles juives.
Tudnék, a zsidó vallásban a héber nyelv az a Tóra, az istenhit nyelve, és hétköznapi ember átlagban...
La langue juive est encore moins pratiquée dans la communauté juive. L'hébreu est très peu utilisé juste pour comprendre le Torah et pour pratiquer les prières du Torah, pour comprendre la divinité, pour comprendre Dieu, puisque le juif était considéré... Le hébreu était considéré comme une langue sacre et comme une langue sacrée et n'était pas utilisé pour la communication. Ce n'est qu'après la Deuxième Guerre mondiale que l'hébreu devient la langue de la communauté juive, la langue de communication, la langue officielle de ces communautés. Les gens locaux ne parlent pas beaucoup le juif.
Local German communities. I know that there are very few already. We don't have time to develop also this theme enough. But surely you work with local Germans, with local German communities. And what about their linguistic practices?
Yeah, actually we don't even work so much with them because as the German Cultural Center we try to address the whole public and make it possible for the public to, the whole Transylvanian public to experience German culture. But once in a while we work with Germans that are, especially the ones that are organized in the forum, the democratic forum of the German minority. And personally I have several friends in the minority. And what I think is very interesting, you just mentioned already that the number is not very large of the Germans that are still here. And you will find in almost all families, at least the ones I know personally, the situation that they are already actually multicultural families. They are not purely Transylvanian Saxons. They have Hungarian family members. They have Romanian family members. They're usually mixed. And due to this situation, of course, there is also a very strong tendency to speak several languages and speak several languages on a very high level. A personal friend of ours, for example, made his profession out of that and became an interpreter who also works a lot in Brussels and so, because he speaks German and Hungarian as his mother tongues, Romanian at a similar high level, English, I think also French. So this is not a rare situation, I think, in the German minority here. So because due to the smallness of the group, you have to speak Romanian as the official language, and quite often you also speak Hungarian due to family ties or so. And then I think there's this tendency: the more languages you speak, the easier it is also to learn even more, or the easier it becomes. So I would say, from my outsider perspective, the German minority here is actually very, very talented and very multilingual or plurilingual even.
Okay, thank you. What about the Roma?
Well, I'm Hungarian, ethnic Hungarian. I grew up in a region where the majority of the population is Hungarian. It's so-called secular land, and the Roma there are also monolingual. But when I came to Cluj and I started to look around here, and before that, of course, I knew that there is a language of the Roma of their own, and this language is totally different from the Romanian language and totally different from the Hungarian language. And still has some words in the lexicon, but the structure is a very interesting and very unique structure, which is coming from India. And what is also very interesting in this, that Roma language was never supported by institutions before 1990. In Romania, actually, everybody expected that Roma will vanish, will disappear. The language will
be assimilated.
Assimilated, yes. And but since the change of the regime, each census, when people are asked which is your first language, the Roma are those who are increasingly acknowledge the Romani as their mother tongue. So it's quite counterintuitive to other countries, like if you look at Hungary or in other neighboring countries, the Romani language use is going down and going to diminish each 10 years. And in Romania, we have more and more. Of course, it's a discussion why and how. Is not only the demographic numbers which influences it, but also the low prestige of the language. Usually, Roma people are stigmatized socially, and because of historically they were associated with the lower class, and the language, of course, is connected to ethnicity and connected to this social status. And now, as they are more willing to acknowledge, because they feel that is less and less of a burden to acknowledge. Of course, I'm not claiming that there is no problem at all and there's no discrimination in Romania, because there is. And there is still a lot of problem with this. But as I said, that the Roma are increasingly using their language also in public. There is institutional support for this, the so-called mother tongue education, which, unlike the German or the Hungarian, which is a full curriculum, you can learn in Hungarian from mathematics, biology, whatever, from nursery school to up to university, and the German is in the STEM situation. The other minorities, like the rest of the minorities, have a so-called education in mother tongue, which means that they have 4 classes each week in their tongue if the parents request. So this is the case for most of the Romani speakers also. But to say frankly, Roma maintained their language for so long, and it was not reproduced by the institutional structure, and they are still doing well. Of course, the state should do more in order to promote and acknowledge the Romani language. It's one issue is connected to the standardization of the language. All over Europe, there are many dialects of the Romani language. And in some countries, for example in Hungary, they even speak of gypsy languages, because there is one group which is Bayeshi. They speak an archaic Romanian.
We have them also in Romania.
Yes, but here they don't. They are not considered of a separate language.
Because it's archaic Romanian.
It's a Romanian, yeah. But the Romani language, which I said, it's an Indic, original Neo-Indic language, is one language, but there are more dialects, and they are usually mutually understandable from one to another. So there are always discussion that the Roma don't even have a language, or there is this kind of, they are all wrong. The Sinti, the same, they are having their own language. There's Romani language for the Sinti as well in Germany. Some of the groups are very sensitive, say that our dialects is very different, and this everybody can understand this and can respect. But linguistically, there is one continuum, and there are more dialects in this. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Plurilingualism had always been one of the strategies of communicating through the linguistic borders and ethnic borders. But there has been another strategy which was very frequently applied, and that's the usage of lingua francas and pidgin languages and hibrid languages. And I know that the usage of English, the status of English language is kind of a hot issue nowadays. From one point of view, of course, it can be considered as a lingua franca, which facilitates communication, international communication. But there are some opinions according which it is some way a tool of colonialization. So I have with me statistics of the usage of English language, and I would like to ask first Ingo, when the biggest numbers are in the Scandinavian countries, where they speak more than 50, on average, more than 50% of the inhabitants speak English. Then you have an average number of around 40, Australia, the Netherlands, and so on. And Germany appears with 32%, and then France with 24%, and Romania is not very far of that, it's with 17%. So I thought it's funny to use these statistical data to interpret a little bit. And so what do you think, I don't know, what the cause is?
Well, yes, I think, of course, English is sort of a lingua franca. You can say that. We also always have the problem if we do events, do we do them in German with translation, or do we do them in English so we reach more people? And I think, from what I understand, that also has to do with English being used a lot in colonies and having been the language of colonizers, because those who were colonized also reshaped or helped reshape the English language, and nowadays it's much more simple, from what I understand, to learn than, for example, German or Romanian or Hungarian for that matter. And I've heard once that in medieval times English was as complicated as German or French or Romanian or other languages. But because it's been used in so many places of the world at the same time, it had to adapt and become more simple. The question is, of course, if this means that in the future we will all speak English. I don't think so. Because for most people in the world, English is and will remain a second language. For me personally, I like speaking English, I enjoy it, but I also very much like speaking German. And we have a nice quote from Jutta von Limbach. She was president of the German Goethe Institute, which is the main cultural foreign organization that we have. She said, I will first say it in German and then try to translate it. She said, Englisch ist ein Muss und Deutsch ist ein Plus. So, which means English is a must and German is a plus. Meaning, if you're a young person in Europe, in everywhere in the world actually, you are sort of expected to learn English, especially if you want to have a career that maybe has somewhat of an international element or so. But German, and I think German stands here for all other languages, it could be French, it could be Spanish, it could be Romanian and so, is a plus, because you can see it in the job market and in many other areas. Science is also a big topic for German specifically. Everybody speaks English, but if you want to be special, you should speak another language as well. And that makes you very attractive for the market. That's very helpful. And due to that, people actually do learn languages. I think the Institut Français, the same as us at the German Cultural Center, we can't complain about people not wanting to learn our languages. They are very, very interested in that. And I think we will see a continuation of this trend. And I think that's beautiful. I think it's not exclusive to say, okay, everybody speaks English. But there are also many other languages. I think it can complement each other. Again, what I mentioned a little bit earlier, the more languages you speak, the easier it gets actually to speak more and more. And as a last point, maybe, learning a language is not just about the communication in a direct sense and about learning the language per se. It's also about learning the culture, the mentality of the other, of the people who speak this language. And therefore, learning a language is much more valuable than just the communication in a direct meaning, but it helps you also in all other situations of life where you encounter the other culture. That's what I believe.
Okay, maybe we can a little bit very briefly introduce also another notion, the notion of, I somehow introduced it as a hybrid language, because I think that in the way we use English, like in this moment, it's not really standard English, it's not really about appropriating English culture or Englishness. It's much more, European or Eastern European English language, which is a hybrid. I mean, which is something, I don't know, what do you think of this? But maybe we can come back to this idea. I would like to ask Robert first, tehát, hogy most arra lennénk kíváncsiak, hogy kinek mi a véleménye az angol nyelv térnyeréséről és az angol nyelv mostani státusáról, vagy egyáltalán arról, hogy mi a szerepe egy nemzetközi nyelvnek.
Intervention en hongrois, donc impossible de traduire pour le moment.
Korábban a szláv nyelv, akkor most úgy néz ki, hogy az angol nyelv már régóta egy ilyen közlekedő nyelv, és hogy te mit gondolsz erről?
L'interprète s'excuse, donc la question n'a pas été traduite en anglais, en roman ou en français. Mon opinion est que l'empire anglais britannique a été un grand empire. Donc c'est évident que leur langue soit répandue partout dans le monde. Les gens qui sont entrés en contact avec la culture britannique ont développé un grand désir de connaître la culture et la langue. C'est un principe qui s'applique aussi bien en Europe qu'ailleurs. C'est un grand avantage de lier les cultures à travers d'une seule langue, parce que la langue offre une vision très particulière sur la culture et sur les particularités d'un pays. Un roman, par exemple, est beaucoup plus riche en signification si on le lit dans la langue où il a été rédigé. C'est toujours mieux d'avoir accès à la langue originale que d'utiliser une traduction. Je le sais très bien, je suis un contre-exemple, puisque je vous ai déjà raconté mon histoire. Mais je pense qu'on a autant de vie qu'autant de langues qu'on connaît. Je me souviens de l'espéranto, c'était un mouvement commencé il y a quelque temps.
De az angol a tudománynyelve, legalábbis az én szakterületemen, dacára annak, hogy
et qui a même laissé des héritiers. Il y a de nos jours des gens qui pensent qu'espéranto était et l'est encore une lingua franca, mais aujourd'hui, elle a été remplacée par l'anglais. Moi, je suis spécialiste en chimie et je me suis rendu compte que toute la littérature allemande a été traduite en russe et puis on est revenu à l'anglais.
Important project, and yeah, China is coming. Absolutely. Yeah, who knows?
Je pense que le chinois est aussi un sujet intéressant.
Laci, the status of lingua franca, hybrids, English, Chinese.
Well, you started with the idea that English is a colonizer's language, so in this at least
some opinions.
Yes. So you can see language as a tool of oppression, of course, but I don't think that is the only way to see the language. I grew up as I said, in Romania, and I hardly could speak Romanian up to my late teens when I learned in school, and then I came to Cluj to learn the language. And this is the way, maybe, one way to approach that. I feel that language is a skill. You need to acquire it because it's useful, and I would connect up with what you said, an asset. And it's also, as Robert said, it's an access. You can access things. And it would be very logical to argue that you should deprive yourself of a skill because of ideological reasons, that you don't want to speak in English because it has a history of colonization. Of course it has. At one moment I remember that I was sitting with my colleagues, anthropologists in Germany, in a beer garden, and we were speaking to each other in English, and at one moment the Slovak colleague Juraj said that you imagine we would do this 100 years ago and all of us would be speaking German, so that would be the logical, because Central Europeans like Hungarian, I from Romania, Slovak, Czechs, that they had, it's always there was one language which connected and helped people to communicate. Of course, now you can say that the Austro-Hungarian Empire and it wasn't that good, but others said it, of course, but it's part of the history. And yes, and the skill, I would put an emphasis on the language as a skill. Each different language is just enhancing your skill. And it's not that you acquire one language as a unit. When you learn, a language is additive. So it's put together with the existing languages, and bilinguals are not speaking two different languages. They speak one repertoire which is extended. So you add the lexicon, you add the rules, and you can adjust to different situations to speak according to the situation as required. So this is the indeed the skill of the multilingual, to speak according to what is required in the situation. And of course there are situations which are more comfortable for people. Native speakers speak their first language in more familiar and they feel easier. They are more difficult, but this is also in all kinds of social situations. You are not comfortable in each and every situation you are entering, but it's also a challenge that you try to meet the expectation, and I think that it's good to speak more than one element of the repertoire and to extend the linguistic repertoire as much as possible.
Okay. So I will start the final round, okay, because maybe also some others would like to intervene or comment or raise questions. So my last question would be, actually Lotzi entered already this room, but I would put it like this. What do you think are the benefits of plurilingualism and how it can be connected, how can it help democracy, and what, if you have any ideas of what kind of strategies could be used to promote multilingualism, plurilingualism, because it's not the same, but we don't enter in theoretical debates now. Ingo, could you please?
Sure, yes. I always have to think of the European motto, of which I'm a big fan, united in diversity. I think that is the strength that we have here in Europe. It's not only a strength, it's also difficult to deal with the situation that we are extremely diverse and that we have all these different languages and that we have to communicate somehow with one another. But as I said, I see it also as a big strength. And your first question was the benefits. I would say the benefits for me are very, very clear. I believe that ideas and innovation come from a surrounding where you have diversity, where you have many different cultures, many different ideas, many different perspectives on life, on everything. And this is a situation we have in Europe. And you see that also when it comes to ideas, to new inventions. And so I think we are worldwide one of the leading regions. That has also to do with all the different aspects of life in Europe. And this only works if we still manage to understand each other. So this is one of the benefits of a plurilingualism or pluriculturalism in Europe done right and working well. I think one of the ways to promote it is one of the programs of the European Union, which I believe is maybe even the best working program. That's this Erasmus exchange concept. Because going to different countries...
Works pretty well.
Yeah, going to different countries, this is really what helps. If young people go to different countries, experience different cultures and live different cultures, and therefore also learn the language and the culture behind this language, this is how we're going to have progress, and this is also how we're going to grow closer together as Europe without sacrificing our local and regional and national identities. I truly believe in this ideal, and I think we're going to see it happen.
Okay, thank you. Robi, most így agyalunk a stratégiákról, hogy mire jó a többnyelvűség, és hogy segíti elő a demokráciát, vagy sem. De gondolom, hogy egyetértünk, hogy elősegíti, nem?
Teljes mértékben egyetértek az elhangzottakhoz, ehhez én személy szerint nem is mernék, nem is tudok hozzáfűzni és kielégíteni, mert nagy bölcsességeket mondanék, amivel esetleg lebőgök.
Il est très difficile d'ajouter quoi que ce soit. On en a dit beaucoup. Quand même, je voudrais ajouter une seule chose qui a été laissée de côté jusqu'ici, c'est-à-dire la communauté juive ne constitue pas une communauté fermée ou repliée sur elle-même. Même si les services religieux
ez teljesen nyílt Kolozsvár lakossága számára, meghirdetjük, nagyon sok két nyelven folyik, tehát románul, magyarul.
S'adresse surtout aux pratiquants. Les événements de notre communauté sont ouverts pour tous. Ces activités ont pour but l'idée de rendre la culture juive plus accessible. C'est un aspect très important puisqu'il n'y a pas beaucoup de gens qui connaissent la culture juive. Par exemple, il y a 2 jours, j'ai participé à un symposium qui portait sur la culture juive. C'était la 7e édition du symposium. Et j'ai eu plusieurs interventions et plusieurs débats qui portaient sur plusieurs disciplines. On a parlé surtout des artistes et des cinéastes de Transylvanie. Avant cela, l'année dernière, on a abordé aussi d'autres sujets pendant le même symposium. On peut se rendre compte qu'aux alentours de Cluj, il y a beaucoup de bâtiments financés ou même ici bâtis par les Juifs. Dans le cadre d'un autre symposium, on a parlé aussi du rôle des docteurs juifs. Voilà que la communauté juive est très ouverte et très engagée pour cette ville. On se propose de démythiser les préjugés qu'il y a en ce qui concerne notre communauté. C'est pour cela qu'on s'implique de cette façon intégrale.
Mindenki él Izraelben. Elég lényeges a németországi zsidóság létszáma is.
Notre position, notre vision est toujours vers une Europe du multilinguisme. La grande majorité des Juifs n'habitent même pas en Israël. Il y a beaucoup qui habitent en Allemagne.
Kivéve a művészetekből, a festészet, zené, ott már nem számít azért annyira a nyelv. művész kifejezi magát a saját eszközén.
En guise de conclusion, le multilinguisme est le moteur de l'innovation et de
anthropological
l'avancement.
observation. Maybe I can finish with one that there is this idea, and in many civilized populations perceive as their language as the only human language, and the barbarians who are over the walls out there, they speak some kind of gibberish which is not understandable. And this situation can be overcome if you learn the language and you understand their language. And it's, of course, it changes also your privileged situation, that you imagine that your language is so exceptional. So all bilingual or multilingual people can put themselves in the shoes of the others. And I think that is basic in the democracy, is a skill that by learning different languages you learn. That you can say a thing in one language and you can say the same thing in slightly differently, but maybe meaning very, very similar thing. You can, if you count in German, you need to put the numbers in the different order in the English, but it's still the same number if you put it down, and you add up, you end up with the very good same results. So I think that this skill of having a multilingualism is important. European Union is not doing too much for it, in a sense, because there is the basic treaty of the Union is not a cultural one. So it's not any rules in the European Union that you should promote. It's up to the member states how they deal with it. But of course, even within these mobility schemes are extremely important, because this indirectly contribute to the culture, to promoting one culture or the other. The cultural institutes are very useful, and it's important to have this. And there is when we were talking, it was this the Council of Europe, which has a charter for regional and minority language. Actually, that's the legal norm for protecting multilingualism, because usually each nation state is aware of the linguistic diversity, and when they ratify this charter, then they join a European Convention with other governments, which say that we have these languages, we protect them, we even found them by enabling the minority populations of speaking them or learning in the school or using bilingual inscriptions, and these rules, I think, that are there, not always are respected or not always put in place, but there are good rules, and this is a part of the legal structure already. So, and this is part of the democratic exercise, that the state has the tools of making respecting the right of each citizen, because linguistic rights is part of the human rights. It's as you perceive that you feel comfortable speaking your native tongue, you should imagine that everybody else is the same, and this right is not given by the state. The states can respect or should respect this, and the European Union is not going into the direction of a melting pot. It will remain always multilingual, and as I said, by learning and by mobility and exchange, this is the way of the future, I imagine, and I hope that we are improving in this direction.
Okay, thank you. And now, if I invite you guys to intervene, to put questions, or okay, 1, 2, okay, please.
So thank you for all the explanations. I was wondering, because you were mentioning the positive aspects for democracy of multilingualism, and so I was wondering, because when in an area where there is a majority and minority languages, most of the time the people from the majority community don't necessarily have to learn the minor languages. So would it be necessary for people from the majority to learn as well the languages of the minority to improve this aspects of democracy?
Okay, is there a peculiar person you would like to ask for? Okay, so what do you think about this question? Okay, okay, Robbie?
Nagyon kellemetlen élményem volt annak idején, mikor 10 évvel ezelőtt először megválasztottak a kolozsvári hitközség elnökének.
Je me trouve dans une position peu confortable. C'était la même position d'il y a 10 ans quand j'ai été élu à représenter la communauté juive de Cluj.
Legalább fele magyar anyanyelvű volt. Elhatároztam, hogy a regnálásom alatt kétnyelvűvé teszem ezt a hitközséget, és az első megnyilvánulásom a holokauszt megemlékezés volt.
La communauté juive clujoise parlait l'hongrois, mais j'ai décidé de changer cet aspect-là au moment où je suis devenu président. J'ai exprimé mon désir que l'institution devienne plurilingue, bilingue. En avril et aussi pendant le mois de mai, on a eu un événement pour la commémoration de l'Holocauste, pour commémorer surtout les expulsions de Transylvanie et de Cluj. On a parlé également en roumain et en hongrois. Il y avait des gens qui se sont fâchés parce que j'ai utilisé l'hongrois et le roumain.
Egyesek elfogadták, mások nem. Olyanok elfogadták, akik azóta
Mais 10 ans après cela, les gens semblent accepter le fait qu'on peut utiliser les deux langues. Voilà, c'est un grand succès. Il y a des gens qui parlent l'hongrois, même si leur langue maternelle soit le roumain. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions dans la salle?
The language of the minority. Not to learn maybe fluently, but if in the school, if there is a region, say Transylvania, where you have a large majority of Romanians, of course, but there are Hungarians and there are Roma, would it harm if the school would teach for the majority Romanians the language of the minorities? Offer at a course, optional course maybe, or even 1 or 2 hours about the culture of the minority. It would help improving the situation in terms of the perception of the minority. Wouldn't teach the students a perfect Hungarian speaking, but it would bring people more together, I say. Of course, it's very difficult to say that is the case in every country, or each country should do the same, but the majority needs more the incentive to learn the language of the minority, because the minority has the incentive of the social mobility, usually, that you need to learn the language of the majority in order to be successful. But if the state has the tools of improving the situation of the minority by giving small incentives for the majority to learn the language of the minority, that is also important for social solidarity also.
Monsieur le commissaire?
Si vous le posez comme ça devient une question beaucoup plus politique. A családom erdei család, úgyhogy magyarul nőttünk fel. 18-19 után az nagyanyám családja románul, magyarul, németül beszéltek. But the question is different. Language is politics, essentially, because it's a power tool. Not just because it establishes a relationship between minorities and majorities, but becomes a tool in the economic and political sense between the powers that be that can extend influence. Today, there are almost no Germans in an ethnic sense in Transylvania, and more people study German in school from kindergarten to high school than ever before. That because it's a power tool. It allows people understand whether they're Roma in Sibiu or Romanians or Hungarians, that's a promise of success professionally and socially in the future. whether it's associated with a high quality education, or there's another cultural or sometimes it's not just directly the language, but an externality that is associated with language. In that case, the fact that you speak German, you go to the German school, it may actually be a higher quality education than your normal, whatever, Hungarian or Romanian language school. It's less prevalent in Cluj, but it's very prevalent in places like Sibiu or Sighișoara, or Brașov. The same applies to other places. So certain languages, because they're associated with the power structure, and it's not just at national level, even at European level, will be at an advantage, at a competitive advantage. That played along the centuries. My French counterpart, that speaks neither German, nor Hungarian, nor Romanian, came to Romania a few years ago when we started working on the programming of the French-Romanian season. And the first shock that he had in Cluj is that this is a Hungarian city, kind of. Why are all the votive plaques in Latin? Partly because it was a power tool. Not because most of the people spoke Latin in 17th and 18th and 19th century, because except a very little part of the educated class, people did not. Even church-going Catholics did not speak Latin. It's for power reason. It was the language of the elites. It was a message from Rome via Vienna and Buddha, but it was a power tool. The same way, because we're talking here in a European lab, the question, and I'm in a sense rephrasing the lady's question before, what happens to this minority-majority relation? You can pose it from national level when it becomes automatically cliched almost in power struggle, local history and vernacular of community relations. If you put it at European level, suddenly it becomes a very different question. In a Europe post-Brexit, we're going to ask questions, is something else going to replace English? Should we replace English? And you cannot, but you already see the power struggle between German and French in European institutions, with the two languages kind of vying for supremacy in the European Parliament corridor, and seeing which one's going to have a bigger chance of becoming, partly because people understand that it comes with influence, and it's not necessarily, it's benign. It's not necessarily a toxic, top-down power play, but it does have this role. So after this lengthy introduction, my question to the panelists, but also to some degree to the audience, is, do we give enough attention to language in that sense? We spend time and money teaching our children languages, and it's funny to see how many parents want their children to study Mandarin because it's the language of the future. The same way that probably my parents' generation in recently communist Romania wanted their children to speak Russian. And some hated it for the same reasons, for political and ideological reasons, thinking that no way you're going to study Russian because it's the language of the quote-unquote occupier. So now it becomes more of in a democratic, competitive European field, it becomes more of a question of, how do I get cultural incentives? How do I start building cooperative institutions across Europe that do allow for a balancing out of these power tools, where German, French, English, maybe Spanish and Italian are at an advantage even to very populous languages like Polish. Who on earth would want to study the most difficult language in Europe? Or Hungarian, a non-Indo-European language that you cannot begin to understand unless you've been, literally spent years studying it, or you've been, socialized in it. So the question is, can Europe, that indeed, as you've said, has no vocation on the cultural side, it's a complete national competence, except in one area. That's a non-European area, where we are allowed to use culture, and we assume culture as a development tool outside Europe. So we use it in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, but we can't do it. It's a no-go area because, of course, it's being a national competence area. Europe shouldn't deal with European culture, but we're allowed to do that in sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia. So do you see any future in cultural and language specifically European domain where we can get incentives to balance this power relationship between language and, this relationship between language and power? Sorry for the lengthy theater.
Very brief answers because we have...
Sorry?
Very brief answers because after...
we have to conclude. Sure, thank you.
Okay, normally I'm an optimist, but hearing what you just said, I had to think about, like in Germany, for example, we have 2 officially recognized minority languages, Sorbic and Frisian. I don't know if anybody ever heard of them, and that's also a bit due to them dying out. Nobody speaks them anymore. I come from an area where we have this Nether German. You could take optional courses in class, but nobody really did. That's the thing with optional classes. You only do them when you're forced to, and we were not. So I think if you look at the language situation in total, I heard last week the number that we have about 7,000 languages in the world, but 59% of the world's population speak only like a few hundred, like maybe 400 or so. And all the rest of the 6,000 plus languages are spoken by less than 5% of the world population. And exactly, they're dying out. They're dying out on a weekly basis. I think one language every week or every 2 weeks, something like that. So we will have that situation. I don't think it will endanger languages like Polish or Romanian or so in Europe. I think they're too strong as local and regional languages. But I do also think what you just said, that we will have either continue to have English and French and German as sort of lingua francas. I suppose so. I'm not necessarily happy with this situation, but I sort of see it a bit happening, yeah.
So I think we have to conclude, and I would like just to add that we spoke about the European level, the national level, and maybe we should think more of the personal level of using languages. Thank you very much for everybody, and thank you for my guests, our guests, and see you more. Okay, and thank you for the translators, absolutely. Okay, köszönjük szépen.
So after a short break of 5-10 minutes, there will be a panel created by Cahiers Journal about decolonizing Eastern Europe. So